Okay. नियत आहारा परिमितः aharo yesham. Those who have got a regulation, restricted in the sense regulated food, the quantity, the quality, the number of times, how they take a limited, a moderate food, neither overeat nor some such things, because having a regulation of food is also a good tapas, a good yajna, because one is two things. It is controls the tongue as well as maintains the health of the body. If you have a good and healthy sattvic food, naturally it creates a mind also. The food in India, it is very common. The food determines the nature of a person. It is so common. I think it is unusual. These days, it has changed now. Because the one biggest problem with Hindus is, little deviation, a few sentences I'll say, I won't go into details. 20th century was a slavish century, slavery for India. So when there was an aggressive attack from outside India, attack of religions, Islam, Christianity, communism, atheism, rationalism, all kinds of things. Anywhere anything happens, those ideas have come to India. And those ideas are bombarded, and Indians didn't know how to handle. The problem was, there was never a united effort on the part of intellectuals of India. If Indian scholars, Vedantins, thinkers, if they have faced these ideas unitedly, then they would have understood, see, any new idea we just don't oppose. Just like Islam and Christianity, we don't ban any ideas just because it is different from us. But the Hindu way is analyze each idea, each ideology, analyze it and see how far it is good and right and how far it is useful to the humanity, both individually as well as collectively. So this Hindus were suffering from this lack of information as well as a lack of thinking. This is our one important Hindu intellectual. Whoever wants to know more about Hinduism, I personally feel this particular intellectual of 20th century, Ram Swarup, okay, everybody must read. He was a great thinker who has understood Hinduism and presented well. So, if you look at historically, when Hindus were defeated and the Britishers occupied, it has affected the psychology of Hindus. Many people found that we are helpless. So two ways, he says, whenever there is a war and a defeat, it not only politically and socially, economically it affects psychologically. That is the biggest problem. It affects. People found that psychologically we are defeated. When there is a feeling of defeat, how to get back your self-respect and self-confidence, it becomes a big problem. So the war in India is different. But this war is a global war. Attack of Islam, Christianity and communism. So before they recovered from one war, another war happened. And these earlier Indian wars were only purely political and wars in a battlefield and it would not affect the society, culture, values, religion, spirituality. It would not disturb. They were purely wars, simply battlefields. We say the battles in a battlefields. The king would change, but the dharma would continue. The culture, values, spirituality would continue. Whoever changes would not affect. That's why we lived for millennia. thousands of years we lived peacefully. But during these last few centuries, these three ideologies mainly, Islam, Christianity and communism, in order to face them, Europe also didn't know how to face them. This Islam and Christianity, they didn't know how to face them. Instead of facing spiritually also, they only become atheist and started attacking Islam and Christianity. So they developed a strong atheistic and materialistic thinking. Because when they found that religion itself is so barbaric, both these religions, they have become barbaric. Instead of bringing spiritual thinking to criticize them, to evaluate them, Islam and Christianity were not evaluated from spiritual standpoint. They are evaluated from atheistic standpoint. You can see even now in Europe, they are evaluated from atheistic standpoint or materialistic scientific standpoint. And that itself has become another thread, another separate tradition of atheism. And all these ideologies have brought into India. And Hindus are capable, but that Hindu outlook, that the Vedantic thinking is capable, but it was not applied. The problem is it was not applied. We have not evaluated the EAT ideology. If it is political, if it is economic, if it is religious, if it is spiritual, if it is dharma, ethics, everything can be analyzed and properly understood. And that was not done. That was the biggest mistake. Therefore, so one problem was, the biggest problem was psychologically, people felt an inferiority complex. How to solve, how to come out of this inferiority complex? There were two ways. One way is, Hindus adopted is, they started condemning their own religion and culture. This is what we feel, the secularist. The modern secularist who is the best, Nehru is one of the best representatives of this kind of thinking. They have repudiated, they have rejected their own culture. They found that Hinduism is defeated. When we are defeated by Britishers, then Britishers have occupied. They started extending this culture. When militarily defeated, they started thinking that our religion is defeated, spirituality is defeated, culture is defeated. We as a humanity, we are defeated. See, this is an extreme interpretation. Militarily, anybody can be defeated, even a great man can be defeated. Military strength is different from spirituality, culture, values and all. But this, our so-called secularist, of whom Nehru is one of the best representatives, they started thinking that, so how to get back that self-confidence, self-respect, which you have lost due to this defeat. They started identifying with a winner, a victorious person. The winner side, now they started rejecting Hinduism, the language, Hindu languages, Hindu areas, Hindu country. They started dreaming, they started imagining, behaving, thinking like Britishers, okay, and communists. Nehru represents Muslim, Christianity, communism and European atheism, and then I think all Britishism, Macaulayism, all things put together, all 4, 5, 6 ideologies. Everything that is the wrong thing, he represents all put together, a combined effect. Because some of the foreigners think that Nehru being made a first prime minister, they think that Nehru represents all our Shankaracharya and all our spirituality and Chanakya and Manu and Veda Vyasa. Because I don't want to go into those details. There was one French prime minister, I think Andrew Malraux. He met Nehru. He thought Nehru is a representative of Hindu because he is made as a first prime minister. So he is a representative of Gandhi, representative of Ramana Maharshi, representative of Ramakrishna, representative of Shankaracharya, representative of everything on the earth. They thought Nehru represents everything. So our Indians, Hindus also gave a wrong impression. We put a wrong face who is a totally anti-Hindu, anti-Indian, a person who is who worth throwing into dustbin, we made him into prime minister. So foreigners thought that, oh, Nehru must be a great man. They came and tried to discuss. Andrew Malra came and tried to discuss Shankara Bhashyam with Nehru. Can you imagine a bigger joke than this? And this idiotic Nehru also should have told that I don't know anything about Hinduism. Please don't talk to me. We'll talk about Europe and then communism and all. This fellow acted as if he knows and representatives and start giving lecturing on that. This is the biggest problem. Foreigners also didn't understand, and our Indians also didn't understand. All are under confusion only. All were under confusion. Even now, some of them, most of them have not come out. A very few people have come out. So because of these things, to get back their self-confidence and self-respect, there were two methods. One is like Nehru's method. Nehru's method is reject all Hinduism, culture, religion, history, everything distort. And start identifying with our invaders, identify with our barbarians who destroyed everything on the earth. Start seeing great in them. Okay, this is one thing. Second thing, which our Shankaracharyas maintained. Do you know that? I am blunt, outspoken person, please forgive me. You listen to me detail, later you will understand. And our Acharyas, our traditional, why Shankaracharya call us all our traditional scholars. Traditional scholars, traditional thinkers adopted. One method is Nehru method. Second method is our traditional scholars, traditional Acharyas. They never bothered to study foreign language. They never tried to study what is the ideology, what is the philosophy, what is the religion of Islam, Christianity, communism, Nehru, what is influencing our younger generation, our modern people. They never bothered to study. Even now they are totally ignorant of what is in Bible, what is in Quran, the history of Islam, Christianity, British. Even now you go to our Orthodox traditional people. Anyway, I represent in a way Orthodox and also little modern. When it comes to traditional subjects, I am really Orthodox. I represent my customs, my behavior, my thinking is Orthodox. But at the same time, I keep in touch with this modern information also. So they are totally illiterate. You talk to them, they behave like babies. Our Orthodox Acharyas, Orthodox scholars, they are very great people in our traditional subjects. Their life, their understanding is highly great. They are really greatly spiritual people. They represent that ancient Vedanta, ancient spirituality. But when it comes to modern life, they just totally illiterate about the external world, what is happening. And the influences that are exercising on our Indian younger generation, they are not aware. They never read because they don't know English. They don't know English, they may know little bit of few words, but they never read our English books. Okay. Now, okay, they may not read directly English books, at least they should select certain scholars who have read modern books and modern ideas, and they should have discussed with them, they would have explained. They never bothered. They totally kept it aside. So this is because, see, as I told you, two ways they have adopted. Both have proven to be harmful to Hinduism and at large to the whole humanity in the world. One is Nehru method, where you reject everything Hindu and India and just to go away to the anti-Hindu side. But you happen to be Hindu, your blood and your skin color, you can't change it. However, you identify with English man, you remain a colored man alone, you can't be a white man. Why don't you accept yourself? Why do you want to act like this? You just be what you are. God has created you and be there. Just accept it. Respect them for whatever they are. Some are white, some are colored. Okay. This is all God's creation. So you try to identify with others and you will become an artificial person. So all these fellows have become artificial. And Nehru himself told, neither there nor here, neither in England nor in India. I am neither there nor here, I am nowhere, I don't know who I am. He lost his identity. Artificial identity cannot give you identity. So he has been an artificial person, not a real human being. Therefore, every step he touched, he only spoiled. And he is bound to do. What else can he do? That's what is what. Second thing, our Orthodox Hindus, our traditional Orthodox people, who come from that ancient tradition, follow that ancient way, even our dressing, our tilaka and language also. See, when I first visited Rishikesh, I think some of you know it, some of my people who attend my talks know him. when I went to Rishikesh, long before in 80s, 82, 83. Somewhere somebody I met, and then he spoke in English, and I also started speaking in English. You know, the sadhus there were shocked. The sadhus around me were shocked. And you know what they told me? Hey, you being a sannyasi, you speak in English? What an apachara. Sannyasis, orthodox people are not supposed to speak in English. Not even know English. Even if you knew, later you take a vow that hereafter, I know some sadhus even now, they take a vow that hereafter I won't speak English. If you speak English, you have to clean your mouth, you have to do little prayaschitta, expiation. They get Ganga water, Ganga jalam, and clean your mouth because you are not supposed to speak English. So when they found me speaking English to somebody, not that intentionally I wanted to do, but somebody came and something happened, I started speaking. I think one Nepali prince, I think a Nepali prince family, I met him somewhere. And he was a highly educated man, he was a prince, he was of a royal family. And he started speaking, he uttered some English sentences, I also speak. Others were shocked. They told, hey, आप साधु होकर, in Hindi told, आप साधु होकर अंग्रेजी में बात करते हैं? You being a sadhu, you speak in English? What an apachara, what a mistake. Oh. So that was orthodox method. You're not supposed, you avoid their languages, you avoid their influences, you just keep them at a distance and you just to follow your, because if you mix with them, you get influenced and you start talking all meaninglessly against Hinduism, against culture, values and spirituality, and talk all like a semi-atheistic or some kind of a perverted people. So one is, when we find that the Britishers have occupied education system, trying to control our economic, society, everything they started controlling, and we are helpless and we don't know what to do. Out of helplessness, what they felt is, it is all Kali Yuga has come. We are helpless now, only God alone should save us. We leave it to God and just keep to ourselves. That's all remain. It is out of a kind of a frustration, a kind of helplessness, not knowing what to do, don't know what to do it. So they just ignored everything. Close your eyes to all these external influence of the European and American influence, communistic influence and all, atheistic influence, Islam, Christianity, all those influences, ignore them. They say all this is Kali Yuga, don't discuss, don't talk about even this thing, and just remain. You keep to your orthodox life, that's enough. You follow your sadhana, study it, and keep them at the distance. Don't even read and speak English. This is one orthodox style, and another is Nehru style. These are the two things Hindus have adopted in order to face this thing. But the third one was a middle. You should have analyzed every new ideology, every new siddhanta, every new theory, analyze them. See their merit and demerit. Then what is good can be adopted. What is wrong, show how it is wrong and educate our people so that that can be expelled. And the real healthy culture, real spirituality and religion would have continued it. It didn't happen. Some people tried like Vivekananda, but Vivekananda also didn't succeed because he mixed up both West and this thing, because he himself didn't understand the orthodox view thoroughly. He mixed up a lot of European, American thinking, Islam, Christianity, communism and all that. So, because he himself was not close to our traditional orthodox people. But he did, in his own way, he did certain good things. So, I think much later, until Karapatriji Swamiji. Karapatriji is the only one who studied the Western ideologies. His one important book, Ramarajya and Marxwad and Ramaraj. In that thing, he analyzed Western philosophy, communism, many things he analyzed well. I am looking for his book, whether he has studied the Islam Christianity as a Purva Paksha and analyzed it. But in those things, in that book, he beautifully analyzed it. So until Karapatriji, nobody did it. And after him also, many people are ignoring his books. This kind of thing, they should have studied it. To prevent that wrong influence of any wrong thinking, wrong ideology, we should have done it. The book is waiting to be translated into English. It's an excellent book, that Ramaraj and what is that, Marxwad. It's an excellent book. I read it a number of times. I mean, it's a very beautiful book. So he analyzed it. But among his disciples, I don't see anybody further continuing it, and it stopped with there alone. Very few people read his books, and most of them, again, the same thing is continuing. Orthodox people remain totally orthodox, unmindful, ignorant of the modern 19th, 20th influence of 19th and 20th century influence. Karpatriji was aware of even Max Muller, Paul, many foreigners' writings. I think he didn't know English, but their writings he read in Hindi. He read many of the things in Hindi. He was a very sharp man, very highly disciplined man. And then anything you just in one reading, he would understand everything and instantly he would tell. And a good thinker, good sharp thinker, very highly creative thinker. And I think he didn't have a suitable disciple, a suitable follower, suitable disciple we didn't get. And if a person is a highly great thinker, to find a suitable disciple also is difficult to find. To find a suitable disciple is rare, because such is a highly thinking person, great person, sharp person, Karapatriji. And finding another person is very difficult. But anyway, at least partly they should have absorbed, they should have understood something. I feel Ram Swarup is somewhat a better person, is a balanced person. Ram Swarup. He has done much more work on that. So he observed these things. So one is totally get alienated. We call in English alienated. Alienated means go away. Get away from your own culture, your own these things. You de-identify, you reject, you repudiate your own past, your own identity. You reject your identity, your culture. You feel ashamed to call yourself Hindu. You feel ashamed to call your own Varna, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya. Even the Varnas, they feel ashamed. Huh? Because they feel something, that's how they are. Even the food culture, habit also, they eat anything, drink anything. But in Indians, we follow all these things. External culture as well as internal culture, both. Internal thinking, the sadhanas, spiritual sadhanas, the thinking, our Shastra depth, the depth of our Shastra knowledge, and the physical, the way of clothes we wear and the language we speak. I think I am a rare one exception when I speak English. I am not supposed to speak. In fact, I stopped speaking for a long time. For a long time, I almost stopped speaking English. Recently, some Italians came, then I had to speak. After a long time, I started speaking again. Otherwise, I stopped almost speaking English. So, and language, and also our eating foods also. All this was based upon Ayurveda. We lived our life, external life was also based upon Ayurveda. See, we wouldn't take even English medicine. Many of the orthodox people, Shankaracharyas, don't take even modern allopathic medicine. They just live by Ayurveda. So that was a culture. So with these two people, they just ignored the influence. And that is a real problem. Now, one Karapatriji, Ram Swarup, and a very few scholars who have done this study, and they have studied the influence of it. Instead of blindly opposing it, study them. How far they are right and wrong, you will understand. And that was missing. Therefore, we find this way. We have not analyzed. And our commentaries also. Our commentaries to our traditional Shastras. Our traditional Shastras, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads and Veda, they need again modern commentary. Modern in the sense, keeping the same traditional view, we won't compromise. But the way it should be explained to the modern man who undergoes the modern influence, who is influenced by these modern ideas of Islam, Christianity, communism, Europe and America and all that. Sociological, political ideas, lot of modern capitalism, communism, many ideas are coming. This French Revolution brought certain new ideas. Okay, so when these new ideas have come, so keeping these new ideas in view, explain our traditional view. These kind of books are very rare and very few you find here and there. You have but very few. I had to search a lot all over India in various languages, 4 or 5 languages which I know. I had to search and found one book in one language, one area, one book in one area like that on one topic. So we have to study that. And that was missing. Therefore, that's how we are suffering the problem here now. Okay, so even that food culture also we had, pranayama we had, all these things orthodox people follow. The food culture, the pranayama, the Ayurvedic system even now. Now recently I am seeing even the last leg, whatever we have, even that getting shaken now. They are also adopting the westernized. I think if it has to survive, again we have to study thoroughly and analyze and protect it. Okay, so apare niyatahara. Regarding the food, there is a regulation of food. Satvika food we have to take. Sattvic food. So the food affects your physical body, your nervous system, your hormone, it affects. Okay, nerves, hormones and your system. Second thing is, food means it is a consumption by your sense organs and mind. Because food is eaten by sense organs as well as a mind. Sense organs means taste. Mind also enjoys that. Therefore, the mind requires a control. Mind and sense organs need purification. So that the craving for food, the dependency, the impulsive craving, the taste for food should go away. You should be able to eat anything without feeling a crave for certain food. Second thing is that the herbal, we would not take this modern, what you call chemicals. We would take just by Ayurveda. I think in my younger days, until I came to cities, we were following the same thing. Dharma Shastra, even Ayurveda, herbal. I think we wouldn't take any modern English medicine. In fact, it was not available in our younger days. We would depend on only Ayurvedic medicines. Much later also, again I would avoid, as far as possible, we would avoid allopathy. We would take rarely. Even now I do very rarely I take. Exceptionally. More often I take Ayurveda only. So this food regulation makes your body sattvic, because your nervous system, brain, it has to be tuned to your spiritual thinking. You need to sit for meditation and japa and the prayers, all that. It requires a particular type of mind. So you have to be molded. Therefore, a food regulation is also a one yajna. Fasting is one extreme. Another is regulating the food, the quality, quantity, the type of food, and how many times you take, all that. Okay? And total fasting also sometimes. All these things, not one day. If you do it for a long time, for 1 year, if you follow this kind of course of food, then you can see the change in your life. See, that 1 or 2 days, once in a while, doesn't make much difference. If you take this Sattvic, Ayurvedic or our Indian food, for 1 year continuously, only live on that food, then you can see pranayama and this food regulation, and along with it japa, dhyana, and then meditation and all that. You do it. After 1 year, you will see the change in your life. Okay? Sometimes, depending upon your life and personality, you may need 1 more year also. But at least 1 year is minimum is required. 1 more year also, then it will be very much better. Then your whole system will be purified. This becomes a yajna. It changes your heart, changes your feelings. Okay? Therefore, apare niyatahara, 30th shloka I am repeating. Apare niyatahara. Okay? This background has taken, I think, 40 minutes, half an hour. Anyway, even this is required sometimes. Niyatahara. Niyataha parimitaha aharaha yesham te niyatahara santaha. They take this regulated food, pranan praneshu juhvati. So they keep the prana within the prana. Vayu bhedan pranesheha juhvati. Vayor jayaha kriyate itaran vayu bhedan tasmin juhvati. Te tatra pravishta iva bhavanti. Then, by this food regulation, you conquer your sense organs and the prana. Because the pranas get disturbed. Prana is a little inner one. Body, sense organs, body, prana, sense organs and mind. We have got these 4. Okay. One is the body. Another is the prana, inner level. When prana is also disturbed, prana gets disturbed due to many reasons. One is your lifestyle. Your thinking also disturbs your prana. If you have a lot of negative thoughts, highly disturbed mind, highly emotional mind, then your prana gets disturbed. And food also disturbs your prana. Then your action, your behavior, your thoughts, extreme thoughts disturbs your prana. In fact, prana purification is an important step of yoga. In yoga, prana is, in fact, what is this prana? Modern science doesn't know at all. What is prana? I think they have no, you can't even translate it. They think there is no such thing called prana at all. Prana doesn't exist. Modern science doesn't know at all. So that pranamaya is a prana body, it's an inner one. Your bodily behavior, your emotional feelings, your food, your thoughts, your behavior affects your prana. Prana can be disturbed, can become negative, weaker, and prana can be made positive also. Prana can be made positive. Purification of prana can purify the mind and body. It can heal many diseases. It can purify the mind. Okay, so purification of the prana is very important. So through your food, asanas, and mudra and pranayama, with these four you can purify your prana. Asanas and food regulation, and then mudra, they are all part of prana. Pranayama is especially directly, it addresses, directly it affects the prana, but even emotional thinking, thoughts also affect the prana. All these things purify the prana, you will be a totally different person. Okay. Even the japa, dhyana also affects your prana, purifies prana. Japa you do, parayana you do, prayers also can affect your prana, but they affect indirectly. Pranayama and food directly affect the prana, but this meditation and japa come from the background, they change the prana. But anyway, they change. So the prana purification makes the person totally different. A person, a wicked person, a terroristic person, you can see his prana will be different. His very prana will be different. And a purified prana brings about very good concentration, very good inwardness, which is useful for any meditation, any sadhana. For hours, years together you can sit and do. Therefore, prana purification is very important. By purifying the prana, you can cultivate the prana and you can get certain powers also. Prana purification gives certain powers to, anyway, we don't go into all those details. So, okay, apare niyatahara, pranan praneshu juhvati. Pranayama, I think that Kumbhaka Puraka we have already stated. Now this is a regulation of food. When you regulate the food, what is this pranan praneshu juhvati? He offers the prana to another prana. Here, this is a very idiomatic way of telling. For this, Shankaracharya explains, Vayu bhedan praneshu means Vayu jaya, he calls it Vayu jaya. Vayu prana is behind your sense organs, behind your body. Means it is an energy, it is a strength behind your sense organs, behind your body, behind your mind also. It is an energy aspect of body, sense organs and mind, all the three. Body means two level again. Body is an external body, there is an internal body. You know what is internal body? Internal functions of the body are called internal body, like the blood circulation, digestive system, lungs, the heart, and the brain and nervous system. These are the inner parts of the body, they function. That is called inner part of the body. That inner part of the body is more governed by the prana. So if the prana is purified, it controls the circulation, lungs and digestion, and then brain system and everything inwardly. That's why many people, Ayurvedic and certain mystic people, they heal the diseases without any medicine. Have you ever paid attention to this? They heal the diseases without giving any medicine. People say, oh, this is all superstition. It works. If you can directly touch his prana, you can influence his prana, immediately his body will change. So directly influencing prana is one way. When you influence the prana directly, the body becomes healthy. Anyway, all those things we don't go into detail, but so this prana affecting changes your inward. Pranan praneshu jayati. One by one prana, you inner pranas, all the 5 pranas you conquer. Then what happens? Your whole body, mind and sense organs become very relaxed, very peaceful, purified and self-controlled. Control also comes easily. Therefore, here Shankaracharya says, Aharo niyata aharaha pranan praneshu juhvati. Pranan vayubhedan praneshu juhvati. Pranan tatra samanaskani indriyani pranashabdena grihyante. See. Therefore, dvitiyanta pranashabdena. Just a minute. 92 Neelakantiya Vyakhyanavanoodya Dushayati. Ayyo, there is a different. Tadapi asa lokaprasiddhartha kalpanadi doshasya atrapi tulyatvaditi dikete sarvepi yajna vidaha. Pranani indriyani ityadyapi pratyuktam lokaprasiddhartha kalpanapatya atayeva praneshu. 91. No. Jnanendriya karmendriya rupan juhvati chitushkumbakabhyena vilapayantityartah iti apastam. Pranam pranepana ityanena yohamsa soham ityanlomatah pratilomascha abhivyajyamana ajapa mantrena tattvam padartha ikyam vatiharena bhavayantityartah. Ayyo. Santah pranan ajitan vayubhedan te ajitah api tatra pravishta ajita eva bhavanti. So pranas become purified, that's all. I think there are many other arguments. I'm just looking for other arguments. We'll leave them. I think the basic idea is same thing. The pranas become pure. Pure in the sense, the negativeness in the prana goes away. Body becomes light, become healthy. Mind becomes purified. The impulsiveness, aggressiveness, depressive type, all these negative things come in the prana, partly emotion. Okay, so so inner mind has got the 3 levels, we can say. One is prana, another is mind, another is intellect. Intellect consists of thinking, mind consists of emotions, prana consists of inner energy. Okay, that inner energy is called prana. So prana, manaha and buddhi. Prana I am unable to translate, so I use directly prana only. It can't be translated because there is no word for it. Some people say vital air and all that. I think the vitality, vital air, it's not a right translation. I feel prana is prana. So prana, mana, mind and buddhi. These 3 are inner self, inner upadhi, let us say inner body, sukshma shariram. The inner body, it has got 3 parts. One is the prana, mind and this thing. So prana forms the energy. Prana constitutes the energy of the mind and intellect, and it is also link between body and mind. That is a sthula sharira and sukshma sharira. It is a link between, because prana, a part of prana is connected with mind and intellect. Another part of prana is connected with the inner functions of the body, nervous system, hormones, nervous system, circulation, and the lungs and heart, etc. It is connected with the inner functions also. Okay. In fact, this Shat Chakra, they call them, all these are connected with prana alone. Shat Chakras are only the prana levels. They call them more symbolically as a Shat Chakra. That means only pranamaya kosha alone. By purifying, by strengthening, by energizing the prana, you can feel the inner one. Okay. I think this much is enough. We don't go into details. Some of you already know it. Those who don't know, want to know it, you can study it. There are so many shastras, so many sciences in India. So, itaran vayu bhedan tasmin juhati te tatra pravishta bhavanti. Prana become controlled. It becomes inner one and it becomes purified. Sarve pyete. Up to this 12 yajnas he stated. Oh, since I think more than 1 month, why 2 to 3 months or 4 months past, we have been discussing these things. So the 12 yajnas, up to which shloka? I think in this 30th shloka, we conclude with all those yajnas. Daivameva Pare Yajnam from the 25th to the 30th. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Six shlokas. From the 25th shloka up to this 30th shloka, we discussed the various yajnas. Out of them, one is the Jnana Yajna. Others are other simple yajnas. Other Karma Yoga, all other yajnas can be included in Karma Yoga. One yajna is directly Vedanta Vichara. Okay, he included Jnana Yajna also in one of them. And the remaining 11 yajnas are only like Karma Yogas. Bhakti is included, service is included, charity is included, pranayama is included, meditation is included. So, various type of ritualistic, physical disciplines, values, mind purification, all these various yajnas, he talked of them. So, sarve pete yajna vidaha yajna kshapita kalmasha. So, all these yajnas purify the person. So, any person who takes any one of these yajna, you may take 1 or 2 or 3, as many as you can do, or even 1 or 2 is good enough. Out of these 12 yajnas, of course 12 means 1 you have to leave out, that is Jnana Yajna, Vedanta Yajna. There is a second yajna he discussed. Out of these 12, second yajna is only directly Vedanta alone, Vedanta Vichara, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Remaining 11 are these. So, Yajna Kshapita Kalmashaha. Yajnaihi yatoktaihi kshapitaha. All these, those who follow any one of these yajna, any one. Therefore, in India, all these are prevalent. We don't insist on any one thing. Out of these 11, any one you can follow, whichever. Or if you add one more thing, we don't mind. As long as, supposing somebody discovers a new sadhana, new meditation, new japa, and another new sadhana. If it really is effective, if it purifies your mind, and also harmonize your personality, integrates your personality, we accept it. There's nothing wrong in it. If a guru teaches one sadhana and his followers take his sadhana and adopt from another guru and mix up these two, combine and start following it, nothing wrong. We don't say that only if you are a follower of one guru, take only that and don't take another one. We just don't have such a thing at all. See, just now Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna included yoga sadhana, bhakti sadhana, karma sadhana, ritualistic, many yajnas. You see how many he included. All these he included in one place. But all these are not taught by the same guru. They are taught by different gurus. But Sri Krishna is teaching all of them together himself. He is a Jagat Guru, Sri Krishna is teaching all this. Therefore, there is no, it's not that only you guru taught one yajna and you just follow that alone and you avoid all other things. Then you start, if you go by that what heresy, if you add another thing, you interpret differently, you call it heretic. We don't have that. As long as the sadhana is effective, useful, you follow and continue it. And you feel that Guruji blesses you, even if you slightly deviate, of course in a positive sense. Not in a negative sense, you are not distorting it, but you do it by adding another aspect from another gurus, or your own mind discovers another slightly modified sadhana, your guru will bless it. We don't feel that our guru rejects you by just modifying it. Guru will be equally happy and God will be equally happy. Ishvara will bless you. So no problem at all. You have a little modification. Slight modification is called as heresy. Okay, in European language. They say no, you are not supposed to modify it, change it. Whatever he told, verbatim keep it. Slightly you change, you are called heretic and there's persecution and all that. Bah, it's very difficult to imagine. How they can live, how Europeans lived, it is a great wonder for me. How they suffered, how they lived. Bah, I think we can never live that. I just can never tolerate this nonsense. Why so much of persecution? Just for thinking differently? Oh my God. I cannot imagine that. How they lived, I don't know. So, Yajna, we have got lot of freedom. We criticize anybody we learn, and whom we criticize also after some time we change and become his own followers. And then we modify, we change. But as long as the sadhana is really effective, you follow. More and more you follow sincerely, you can see the new depths in it. Wherever necessary, you may modify, you may adopt from other gurus, and then you combine in your own way, and then you follow it. We combine various ways, partly yoga, partly bhakti, partly ritual, partly something. We combine and make it into another sadhana. Partly Vedic, partly Pauranic, partly Tantric. You can see them. See, if modern days, in my Sandhya Vandanam, which I did it, there are Veda mantras, there are Pauranika mantras, there are tantric practices like mudras and etc. In our Sandhya Vandana, before my sannyasa, when we were doing it, all these three mixed up. Tantric mudras, tantric sadhanas were there, Pauranik was there, Veda mantras were there. Partly that, partly this, but all three combined together we were doing, and we would say it is all Vedic only. Because Veda means even extended Veda. Puranas are extended Veda. Tantra is also Veda. We don't call Tantra as a separate. Even all tantric books say Tantra is nothing but an extended Veda. It is a Vedic extension alone is a Tantra. So we don't consider as the orthodox people, traditional people don't consider something separate. Since thousands of years, the books have been written. Even BC, tantric books existed even before Christ. I think 5th century, 4th century existed these tantric books. And they refer to Veda, and they are all just another form of Vedic rituals alone. So we combine all these things. We don't feel anything as separately. Okay? And that's the right way. Why make it just one person centered and then blasphemy, call it heresy? All that is unnecessary. You sacrifice the inner depth, the inner effect of the sadhana for sake of external form. It's something like a tablet or something is brought to you, a chocolate or some eatable. For sake of the wrapper, for sake of the external packing material, you don't like the packing material, you throw away the inner content, though it is beautiful and good. So Hindus don't bother much about external wrappers, names and forms. Pay attention to the inner effectiveness of the sadhana. We look for it. We look for the effectiveness of sadhana, that's all. That is most important. That's why we didn't bother to study the historical aspect of the book. Now modern Indologists do most of them. In which century it was written, who wrote it, and then when, in what period it was written, what was his earlier influence, which idea he borrowed from others, which idea was his own, whether his own and borrowed, it doesn't make any difference, as long as the teaching that sadhana is effective or not. We freely borrow our Gurujis and without taking our name, because it is not ours, it is everybody's together. It is all combined. All our teachings, sadhanas are combined. I say most of the ideas even of Shankaracharya and everybody, Vedavyasa, without taking their name. If you start taking their name for each idea, how will you take? Whose idea you will take it? It is all a collective knowledge of all our gurus, all our acharyas. That's why we call it as a traditional knowledge. It is a collective knowledge of all tradition, entire tradition. Because we don't separate each acharya separately. As in Europe, we have got a different school, centered on one person. Each person forms one separate school. And now the Europeans who visited India, they try to get Ramana Maharshi separate, Ramakrishna separate, Shankara separate. Now each person-centered schools, they started creating it. So, but we Indians don't separate them. Ramana Maharshi, Shankaracharya, we don't see as separate. Both are one. They are all one together. Even Ramana Maharshi did not feel Shankaracharya as separate. He felt he and Shankaracharya were one. Therefore, so we look at the effectiveness of sadhana. As long as it is effective, follow. That's all. And Guru gives you Diksha and you can follow. So which century started, who started it, whether should we accept or not? No, only this sadhana should be put in his name alone. This is ridiculous. So I'll tell you one example. Buddha taught certain things. Later his followers modified certain things. Buddha was not in favor of rituals. A lot of rituals developed in the name of Buddha. Idols, Buddha idols, they put them for meditation, help for meditation and japa and many things they do. Now these, you see, some of the Indologists and some of the Indians also start criticizing the modern Buddhists, saying that, hey, you have deviated from Buddha, you went against Buddha, yours is not Buddhism at all. Why do you say that? You tell me what is Buddhism. There is no such thing called Buddhism. Any spirituality is Buddhism. Why do you want to particularize into one person? We don't have person-centered. What Buddha taught, what Buddha practiced, what Buddha did not teach. All this put together is Buddhism. That means what? Buddhism, Hinduism, there is no separate. All are, as long as it is a spiritual teaching, follow. Why do you divide it whether it belongs to Buddha, belongs to somebody else? The basic principles should be underlying Hinduism principle, that's all. So Buddha did not teach anything new. He only certain aspects of Vedic religion, he took it and emphasized and propagated, that's all. Exclusively, exclusive means particularly. Instead of calling exclusive, let us say particularly. Certain other rituals he left out, and he told that's not necessary, and follow this meditation, values, concentration of mind, sannyasa, and that's all. He didn't think that he is founding a new religion and then moving away from it and is against Hinduism. So Hindus were his followers, and he also respected people mixed with together. He didn't feel that he is a separate religion. And the modern people start dividing people. Okay, so all these yajnas, yajna kshapita kalmasha. Now when they read Bhagavad Gita also, they say in Bhagavad Gita there is a yoga element, then bhakti element, Vedic element. Now which one Krishna follows? Now they start dividing the people. Oh my God. All these things are one. You don't have to divide it. We never thought it that way. Nor our previous acharyas thought it that way. We all took it as a combined one, and we are continuing even now. As well, of course, nowadays in the 20th century, they started mixing Christianity and Jesus and then all Prophet Muhammad's teaching and everything. They started mixing into Hindu. That cannot be mixed because they are totally different. They are not in keeping with the foundational principles of Hinduism. Hinduism means universal only anyway. Universal facts. So they are against the basic principles, universal principles of Hinduism. So therefore, because they just go against it, it is like they call the soul is Atma, but soul is not Atma, soul is only mind. They have no concept of consciousness. They call spirit, all the spirit, soul, everything means mind only. They don't go beyond that. Biblical language doesn't go beyond that. They have no idea of the Atma as consciousness. And Atma can undergo rebirth, punarjanma. So our Atma is different. All these things they have no idea. Therefore, the nature of Atma, so you can't accept certain things and then adopt into Hinduism, which go against Hinduism, basic foundational principles. And some people like Vivekananda try to mix up, and it becomes a patch-up, and the patch-up remain, even now the patch-up alone, it is not able to mix healthily. It's like I tell you, you take somebody's blood and transfusion. Blood you take, sometimes some person it becomes too weak, or he undergoes operation, he takes the blood from others and transfuse it into his body. You can't take any blood. See here, you note it. The blood of only that particular group, there are 4 groups everybody knows. If your blood is of particular group, only blood of that group alone you can take it. You can't take the other group because it goes against you and it kills you. Similarly, the principles which are underlying basic principles of Hinduism, any new idea, any new sadhana, which can easily mix with these foundational principles alone, we can adopt. You can't adopt anything from Islam, Christianity, communism and destroy Hinduism. That won't work. Some people tried and the whole thing has become confusion. Okay, leaving it. Now we go leave that point. Come to our point. All these yajnas, those who follow these various yajnas, yajna vidaha, all those people who know these 12 yajnas, any 1 or 2 or more than 1, yajna kshapita kalmashas, those who follow these yajnas, except one, I am dividing it. One is a jnana yajna, other is all other things can be combined into, merged into, combined into, clubbed into, not combined, clubbed into karma yoga. So all these karma yogic yajnas, what will they do? They will purify your mind. They make your mind free from impulsiveness, free from instinctiveness. It makes you self-controlled. So that a self-controlled mind doesn't waver, is not prejudiced. It becomes relaxed, free from impulses. It wants to know the fact as it is. It is willing and ready and prepared to understand it. That mind which is relaxed and pure, and not fascinated, attracted by worldly things, money, status and pleasures and all that, that mind is a pure mind. It's capable of doing vichara. Okay, tattva vichara. So yajna kshapita kalmashaha, all these yajnas, the followers of all these yajnas are yajna kshapita kalmashaha. They are the people who have purified their mind through all these yajnas. The 30th is over. Let us go into the 31st shloka. I think a little bit we will say and then conclude for today. Yajnashishtamrtamujo yanti brahma sanatanam nayam lokoscha yajnascha kutonyah kuru sattamaha. So a person, any of this yajna he should live, he should follow. Because yajna means purifying your mind, making you humble, simple, selfless person, integrated personality. So yajna shishtamrta bhujaha, a person who partakes, a person who eats the amrita. Amrita is a prasada. Amrita is like a prasada. Amrita at the end of the yajna. Amrita that remains at the end of yajna means offering worship of Bhagavan. When you worship at the end, you get the blessing of God, blessing of Ishvara in the form of prasada. That's called yajna shishta. Any yajna, when you do it, you do the yajna. First thing is, all these various yajnas taught here, they have to be done as a service, as a devotional service, as a devotional worship to Bhagavan. So when you do it, as a result of your devotion, you get your mind and body, everything gets a very peace of mind, a purity, a peace and self-control. Okay? Self-control, purity and peace of mind and sense organs, you get it. This purity, this self-control, this discipline, this control is called Amrita. You get the Amrita as a result. Amrita means the nectar. Nectar. So Amrita is a yajna shishta amrita bhujaha. A person, by performing these yajnas, one or two of these yajnas, sincerely, wholeheartedly, as a worship to God, he will get a peace of mind, a joy, a purity, a self-discipline, a self-control. And that is called yajna. A person who enjoys that yajna, who experiences that yajna phalam, the fruit of yajna, the result of yajna, is the purity of your mind. Yanti brahma sanatanam. A person who partakes that yajna phalam, the fruit of yajna, the blessing of God at the end of your yajna, he is such a person. Yajnanam shishtam. I am reading Bhashya. Evam yathoktan yajnam nirvarta yajna shishtamrta bhujaha. Yajnanam shishtam yajna shishtam. Tad amrutam. Bhujante bhunjate. Those who partake this yajna phalam, the blessing of Ishvara, the humility, the blessing, the purity, the simplicity of heart. Yathoktan yajnan krutva tat shishtena kalena yathavidi choditamannam amrutakyam bhunjate iti yajna shishtamrta bhujaha. What will be his benefit? Yanti brahma sanatanam. He will reach the sanatana brahma. Sanatana, see word here is using by Bhagavad Gita is using, and Shankaracharya also. Sanatanam chirantanam. Chirantanam means what is always there. See, Sanatanam is explained as a chirantanam by Shankaracharya. Chiram means always, eternally it remains. Okay, chirantanam. Mumukshavaschet kalatikramaapekshaya iti samarthyat gamyate. So if he is a mumukshu, he follows these yajnas and meditations. After the death of the body, he will go to Brahmaloka, and from there he will get the jnanam. That is one way. Otherwise, directly you get here. Either way, you will get it. Okay, nayam lokosya yajnasya kutonyah kuru sattama. Life should become a yajna. Some yajna you should follow. Either of these 11 type of yajnas, or your life itself should become one yajna. A person whose life has not become yajna, has a devotional service to Bhagavan, as a prayer, as a service, as a devotion to Ishvara, then ekopi yajno nasti, see Bhashakara says. If there is no at least one of these 11 yajnas, at least one, if not one or more you can have it. So ayajnaha, such a person is yajnaless person. Ayajnaha means yajnaless person. A person whose life is not yajna. For such a person there is no peace of mind. And ayam lokosya yajnasya. There is no peace and joy of this life. Then where is the question of his peace and joy later, after the death of the body in other world? So kutonyo vishishta sadhana sadhyaha kuru sattama. Okay. Evam 32. Evam bahuvida yajna vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidhitan sarvan evam jnatva vimokshase. Now here the topic is changing. Now why these yajnas were brought here? 25th shloka. 24th shloka he touched one point, and that he is concluding in this 32. Okay. 24th shloka he talked of something. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi, we discussed elaborately for days together, and that point is connected here in the 32. I think this point again will go back little bit to 24th and then the 32. In the next class we will discuss these two shlokas connection. In between there is a slight deviation from the 25th to 31. Okay. Now the 24th is connecting now. This 32 shloka is connecting to the 24 Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi. Now he gets a total. Then we will get a total picture. Why we discussed all these yajnas, all these days, you will understand it in the next shloka when we discuss in the next class. Okay. After a long time, after a gap, I think one week or 2 weeks, I don't remember. 1 or 2 weeks we gave a gap, and then we had Gita today. Anyway, next week we shall have Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om Tat Sat.